There's as many points of view about spirits as there are people who discuss the subjects of spirits. There will always be a raging debate or arguments between those who do believe in spirits and those who don't believe in spirits. But also there's debates and discussions within those groups as well. And if you were to take a set of people, all of whom had a strong, resounding faith in the existence of spiritual beings or spiritual entities, and you put them together in one room, you would quickly find they all had very different points of view and beliefs. So essentially there's no real hard and fast idea as to what these things are, whether they exist, and how they operate. Strictly speaking, all I can do as an individual is to tell you what I think, what I've experienced, and then just to leave it open for yourself. I cannot make hard truth claims as to a particular form of activity working, but I can try and provide some kind of guidance as to how I personally attempted to achieve something, and I certainly can't guarantee that the same exercise will work for absolutely everybody on the face of the planet. So I'm just going to give you a basic lowdown of some of the things that I've done. First and foremost, I've used dream time. Dream time can be most interesting. We dream about all kinds of different subjects. To a certain extent we can say, and as a result of science, that we use our dream time to try and get some kind of chemical balance or equilibrium within the brain, or some kind of balance to our own brain waves and brain chemistry. Maybe to digest the happenings in a day or within our lives. But once in a while strange things happen within dreams themselves. I've experienced times when I myself have shared dreams with other people. Namely, we had the same dream, sometimes from the point of view of two characters within the dream. I would dream about what they did, and they dreamt about what I did. The setting and the scenery would be just the same, for instance. Occasionally it would be a question of someone who I knew coming to visit, so to speak, in the astral body, and me dreaming that they suddenly appeared in my bedroom, for instance. Then, of course, I would have to quiz them the next day. When I did that type of experiment or experience with the spirits of the living, shall we call them, just for convenience's sake, I would choose to not tell them in advance that I was going to experiment in this way. Then I would do the experiments, and then I would ask them the next day, just in passing or in conversation, what did you dream of last night? And occasionally I would get some staggering similarities between what I had either created or tried to make happen and what they themselves reported back. That's one type of spirit experience. But there's other types as well, including those which involve spirits which we seem to create through the development, temporarily speaking, of a religious paradigm. This involves fantasy, essentially. Telling yourself a story every night about a particular spiritual entity. Maybe lighting candles to this one particular spiritual entity as a sacrifice when you're doing some prayerful or meditative work. Maybe drawing images of this one particular being. Or maybe its spiritual signature. Essentially doing ritual or celebration or worship to this alleged spiritual entity, and then asking it to participate somehow, or to affect you when you're lying in your bed or when you're dreaming, can be a very interesting and sometimes even nerve-wracking experience. And yes, I've had some experiences like that. Of course, any apparent results could be put down to something of a psychological nature by those who are of a skeptical mindset. But sometimes the experience can be so profound, or indeed so odd, especially if you ask the spirit to tell you something that you didn't already know, and that was later confirmed through further research and indeed through conversations with people, that it leads you to think that there's something else happening there. Then, of course, there's Ideomotor experiences. Once you've had a few of these experiences of spirits of the living, and spirits which you have created, then why not move on to something like an Ideomotor experience? When you're using the Ouija board or the pendulum, try and see it as just that, an Ideomotor experience, even after you've had some very strong, stark spirit experiences, you'll never fully understand what the experience means. All you can do is say that that experience seemed to occur. Now the same is true with the Ouija board. Get yourself one, make yourself one. The cheapest one you could probably make would involve something like an A3 clip frame and a piece of paper of A3 size that you'd written the letters and written the numbers on, as well as maybe the positions for yes, no, hello and goodbye. And you'd use maybe a large coin as a planchette. Play with it, experiment with it. Teach yourself the positions of all the letters so your deep subconscious mind knows where they are. Take time over it, and then maybe include that in a spiritual experience in which you've attempted to create or invoke a spirit, whether it's the spirit of the living or a fantasy spirit which you have created. Maybe, if you feel brave enough, experiment with a spirit which other people have believed in. Something from folklore, maybe. A mischievous spirit such as the bogey beast, or basically the bogeyman. Where else did he come from apart from folklore? Or possibly a pagan deity, Odin, Thor, Horus. Or possibly a demon from the Lesser Key of Solomon, depending upon what you see fit. But the Ideomotor experiences of using the pendulum and the Ouija board, they can only provide an apparent message through physical manipulation. Namely, something in your mind affecting your fingers, moving the planchette, or creating that little small jolting movements of your fingers when you're holding the pendulum, which creates the behavior of the pendulum, which you can then interpret as being a message from the spirits. Remember, there's various different inefficiencies in both Ouija board and pendulum experiences. Maybe something in your mind was getting in the way. Maybe there was a breeze. Or maybe your muscles just needed to move just to allow the blood to flow or the nutrients to move through them, whatever. It could be down to something physiological. So there'll always be questions, but the experiences themselves are often great fun. Then of course you can move on to something like the dark mirror experience, which works very similar to the Ouija board and the pendulum, but instead of using the movements of the muscles of your arm and your fingers, it uses things which appear to be within your vision. Of course, it isn't your vision, it is your own reflection in the black mirror. You do it in a completely darkened room, and the only illumination is candles, either side of your dark mirror, or maybe your bowl of water or frying pan of water which you have knelt over. And you gaze at your reflection, whilst invoking the spirit. Maybe you want to do this after you've spent some time invoking this being, praying to it, summoning it, believing in it. And then as you stare and develop the persistence of vision effects, whereby your reflection seems to go cloudy, something may start to take its place. I had one rather stark dark mirror experience one time, in which my facial reflection had changed from being the familiar face onto the cloudy effect which happens when one gets the persistence of vision moment, and then after that another face which appeared relatively clear seemed to take its place. It had a more pointy chin, a sharper nose, the skin itself seemed to develop scales, and the eyes seemed to be piercing, and a strange emotion of fear and paranoia seemed to come over me as I saw this thing in stark clarity for a few seconds, until I, in a moment of fear, I admit, decided to stop the experience straight away, blew out the candles, and decided to turn the lights on and have a nice cup of tea and enter back into reality. Some of these experiences can be peculiar. Occasionally you'll get apparent messages coming to you, not verbally, but as if the meaning was being carried through the air, the meanings of words, which somehow settle in your mind. Sometimes it feels like a bolt of static electricity, just a gentle buzz has touched you, and as it does so the meaning seems to enter you. It's all rather peculiar stuff, but it's definitely something worth playing around with. That is, if you want to be an experimental occultist. But remember, all occultism is still experimental. You and I will never know what any of these experiences mean. Some people have made the intellectual mistake of jumping to conclusions on the basis of a few experiences, but without enough information. The kind of mistake which I'm sure the legendary Sherlock Holmes would probably have disapproved of. So having a good quality of structure to your reasoning ability before doing these experiences and after doing them can be a great thing. But of course, during them, you try and have a suspension of disbelief. Be in a state of reverence, a state of belief, or a state of faith in whatever spirit being you're trying to summon or trying to deal with. But always try and end that state of mind when the experience comes to an end, and you put away the Ouija board, you put away the pendulum, and you put the dark mirror back into its box.